Good afternoon, everyone, and bonjour. Today, I am going to talk about, as the topic suggests, transnormativity. So we'll begin by touching upon both theoretical conceptualization of the concept transnormativity, and then we'll go in the second half of the presentation towards the repercussions that it has on trans, largely, but not limited to trans youth's identity, development, and embodiment. So the cisgenderist bioessential model that accepts biomedical explanation to all trans issues in the form of transnormativity is what we'll see in the second half of the presentation, when we'll talk about how it has direct repercussions on the trans embodiment that we see in today's time. So can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, okay. Just 1 sec, I'm gonna set up mine as well. Okay, perfect. So looking at the concept of transnormativity here, okay. Transnormativity in layman terms can be understood as the expectations placed on transgender individuals to conform to traditional gender roles and presentations to be accepted by the society. In other words, I would say like there's a set pattern and a formula to be an ideal male and an ideal female. Transnormativity gives you that formula to be an ideal, true, authentic trans person. It validates and normalizes trans individuals who conform to medicalized binary gender identities, adhering to traditional gender roles, and embrace narratives of being born in the wrong body, as Vivian Namaste would say. Consequently, medicalization becomes a key aspect of transnormativity, defining what is concerned as authentic transgender. So, as I said, it gives you a formula of what it means to be a true transgender. And for that, we'll quickly go to slide number 2, the next slide. And yes, so historically, Harry Benjamin's seminal work, The Transsexual Phenomena of 1966, outlines a prototype of what a true transgender individual looks like, and many other of the medical practitioners who were working with transsexual people of that time also contributed to this prototype. According to Benjamin, a real trans person would know their gender identity from a very young age. So I knew from a very young age, from the age of 2, 3, I knew. This is one part of that prototype. They identify strictly with one of the binary, and which in most of the cases is the one that was not assigned to them at birth, the other binary. They conform to traditional gender roles, experience extreme physical dysphoria, desire a complete medical transition, and would typically wish to disappear in the society. I mean, pass successfully, disappear in the society as any other cisgender person without any remnants of their pre-transition gender. So this is what the prototype is about, and this is what generally transnormativity encompasses. This model establishes a case where dysphoria and pain justified the needs for gender-affirmative medical care. So a lot in the next few decades was gained based on this model, which was it justified the need to access gender-affirmative medical care, making it available. But eventually, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So it helped gain many legal and medical rights and social legitimacy, but it had deep impacts on, one, how the trans self-identification process was taken on, and plus the social imagery, the popular social societal perception of what it means to be trans was also colored by this prototype. So, and eventually what happened was in medical affirmation of gender, and we would come to that in a while. This prototype, this model, it became a basis for diagnosis and determining whether you're eligible to access GAMC or not. So what did this was, and we've seen in recent times some papers where trans youth have voiced how they have to exaggerate the symptoms consistent with dysphoric criterias, um, just to receive the support in front of their psychologist, in front of their psychiatrist. And this, in a way, is also supporting and extending the current understanding of gender dysphoria. But this is what it takes to access, to be eligible to have gender affirmative medical care. Can we please go to the slide which is previous to this one? Sorry, I'll have to keep going back and forth. You see a small quote here. While the pressure to adhere to one's assigned gender has eased, transnormativity now imposes expectations of conformity and consistency on trans individuals. This is an important work by Medico and Anipul and Sansvenko. So what now is happening is, you can see that there's a shift from you have to conform to the gender that was assigned to you at birth. Cisnormativity, cisgenderist understanding, which can also be explained as societal expectations that all individuals are and should be cisgender, meaning their gender identity aligns with the sex that was assigned to them at birth. It assumes cisgender identity to be natural, normal, superior to trans and non-binary identities and experiences. We also would like to talk about the ubiquity, the normalization, the invisibility of cisnormativity that is painstakingly created by social institutions, social practices, social agencies, and which is rarely named and very, very less questioned. So this conjointly renders transgender identity as not normal, leading to marginalizing their voices, their identities. Further, cisgenderism, as defined by Ansara and colleagues, is an ideology that delegitimizes the people's own understanding of their gender and bodies. Regarding trans young people, this can mean that their genders are denied, non-binary genders are refused, and deterministic claims about assigned sex are asserted. In this model of transnormativity, in this model which keeps cisgender at that pinnacle of gender spectrum. So cisgenderism can mean that others seek to determine for trans people what their embodiment should look like. And this entire process of making cisgender look so normal, immutable, natural, is what we are going to deconstruct today. So quickly talking about my positionality here, I am a woman, a cis woman from South Asian continent who has recently migrated to Canada. I'm a mother. I'm a person belonging to visible minority. And one second, I need to get charger for my laptop. I'm very sorry. Yes. So I was talking about the technology is planning to try to disrupt my voice, but I'm sure I'm not going to let that happen. Yeah. So I come from a place where young women's agency over their sexual rights, over their embodiment, their bodily rights, was not very easily given to them on a platter. They had to be taken. So if I say that I can relate to what trans embodiment and trans people go through, ha ha ha, that would be a joke. I cannot relate to it. I'm a researcher who's been working with trans community for 10 years, but I still cannot relate to it, and call out those researchers who say, I know, I can be in your shoes. I'm a woman, I understand. No, you don't. The only thing, the least and the best thing that I can do is to be a true ally, to be in solidarity with the trans community that I have been doing. Being a teacher educator, I have seen my students struggle with these so rigid, fixed, natural looking, natural painted norms of gender, of having neurodivergence. And I've seen that struggle very closely. That motivated me to work in this field. And I've been working in this field for last 10 years with Indian transgender and Hijra community. But that puts me in the position of being a true ally and be in solidarity, but not in the shoes of a trans person. So I am not here bringing voices of trans person to a pedestrian today. I am doing what I should be doing. Being a cis woman, I am questioning the center. I'm questioning the norm. I'm questioning the institutions that place cisgender heteronormativity to that pinnacle, to the core. And here I would like to give an example that one of the Indian feminists, Nivedita Menon, the analogy that she quotes in her book, Seeing Like a Feminist, where she says that where she compares the hard works that goes inside creating this normative narratives look very natural and neutral, the social structures that put all the hard work behind, with the nude makeup look, or what we in today's time call the no makeup look. I mean, you keep painting your face for hours. There's mascara, there's eyeliner, there's nude lipstick, there is highlighters that go on it. And at the end of the process, you say that this is our no makeup look. So we don't have any makeup on us. This is natural, dewy, fresh look that we have, but there's a lot of effort that goes in there to make it look no makeup. So similarly, there are institutions that are in place that work in very systematic ways and very painstaking ways to keep these systems in place. And coming back to the standard of being a true trans, the prototype that we have provided here in front of you, it doesn't mean that this idea cannot be a reality of many trans people. But saying that this is the only reality of being trans is what is we are questioning today through this presentation. When we talk about transnormativity, trans realities can go beyond these characteristics, and they're very diverse. Many trans and non-binary, and I will not keep talking about non-binary separately than trans, because you will see in the course of this presentation that we are trying to say that non-binary is part of the transgender umbrella, and it is not something which is separate. The need that non-binary people nowadays are having of mentioning that we are not trans and we are non-binary is something that we are going to question today. So many trans and non-binary individuals do not fit this ideal trans prototype and have a positive relationship with their assigned sex body. They experience gender euphoria alongside dysphoria. They do not desire all or any gender affirmative medical procedures and may not conform to binary gender roles at all. Further, scholarly work in trans studies often reduce dysphoria to a psychiatric disorder. So what this it's not that this is a phenomena that's happening. It has many lived repercussions. So we're going to talk about that also in the next slide, please. Yes. So we saw that this becomes a basis for diagnosis and determining eligibility to access gender affirmative medical care. You have to prove that you're dysphoric. You have to prove, at times overdo, exaggerate your dysphoria in order to become eligible to receive gender affirmative medical care. So in this system, if somebody is not really um, at discomfort with their body, it's very difficult for them to access medical care. because there's an assumption that medical care is the solution for all the trans issues, and the biomedical explanation is the solution for all the trans issues. But if somebody wants to enhance their androgyny, their androgynous bodily presentation, they can also opt for GMC, but all those are very discomforting issues that are not covered in this kind of model right now. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, please. This is a picture. If we can just go back and spend half a second, this is a picture from one of the caves in India, and this is almost 4,000 years ago. Because we have documented history of gender fluidity, which was present, documented, celebrated to the extent of being worshipped in India. So you can see how this body, this ideal of a god, is equally divided into two parts. You will see feminine body on one side and masculine body on the other side. So this, and not only India or Indian subcontinents, many other cultures, such representations were very highly documented, present, celebrated, and visible in many cultures until colonization happened to India. So decolonizing of gender identities in different cultures is something that can be taken up in future. And I'll be most happy to work on it if somebody volunteers. Okay. So next slide, please. Yes. So when we talk about these limited gender modalities that come out of a model which talks about distress, which talks about dysphoria, which talks about with extra emphasis on damage-centric approaches, what Tuck 2009 would term, trans embodiment in academic discourses is to be seen. It has to be seen beyond gender dysphoria. I mean, if you pick up articles, research articles about trans embodiment, it's very common for you to encounter dysphoria, mental health, anxiety, percentage of depression higher in trans people than cis people, in some kind of trans people than other kind of trans people. Every other article begins talking about all these hardships of trans lives. Yes, it is true. These are hard realities of trans lives. They are undoubtedly inseparable parts of their realities, their lived experiences. But are they the only kind of experiences that trans people are having? So while talking about transnormativity, we are questioning the distress, the mental health concern, the extra focus, the zooming on damage-centric approach. And that is often the way academic discourses talk about. This restricting trans embodiment to dysphoria, according to Riggs and Rosenberg's article of 2023, what it does is it reduces the complexity of dysphoria also to a certain extent. Trans young people are seen in a very unilateral sense. And the dysphoria is also seen in a very unilateral sense. It is not seen as within the complexity of the phenomena. Dysphoria is treated not only as axiometric, but as unilateral. In other words, feeling dysphoria about one's body is treated as telling the entirety of the story about trans young people's life and their bodies. Finally, what this discourse very cleverly does is it presumes that the category dysphoria holds common and even clear meaning for everybody, and ignores the social context that leads to dysphoria. Dysphoria is equal to physical dysphoria in most of these is the common understanding that we have. So talking about social dysphoria and the social context that leads to dysphoria is generally missing. So this is the cisgenderist framework that we are questioning. when we talk about transnormativity. Some trans individuals experience dysphoria, absolutely, and desire gender affirmative medical care to physically change their bodies to better align with their gender. Whereas other trans individuals are comfortable in their body and do not desire gender affirmative medical care. These are the diversities of trans people, young people, trans people who are adults. This is the embodiment, the voice which is missing from the discourse that needs to, when we are too focused on the damage centering dysphoric understanding of trans embodiment, and it at the same times invisibilizes and erases a lot of diversity that we're going to see in the second part of the presentation, and it pushes for assimilation in the larger mainstream cisgender narrative. Uh, so this is a kind of microaggression as an existential matter for many who do not conform to conventional cisgenderism. This also creates an issue of, am I trans enough? Am I true trans? Which often the um non-binary or non-cis readable trans individuals have to go through when they become a part of the trans collectives, where cis readable trans or binary trans dominate. So they often have this self-doubt. This impacts their identity recognition process and impacts the way society perceive what it is to be trans. So that image, the ideal trans image, actually does a lot of personal as well as social harm. And at the same time, there is a complete absence of trans joy concepts that are very positive in nature, which bring happiness. There's hardly any discussion of body positivity. There's hardly any discussion of the joys of being trans, or what recently the trans community activists or researchers have started to call gender euphoria, trans joy, which Professor Shuster and Westwood have also called the deficit of trans joy in the sociology, and I would say trans studies as well. So that's something that is missing when we are too focused on the distress approach, on the damage centric approach. So we hardly get to hear all these terms about being confident in your body, of being peaceful in your body, having joy, happiness, uh, before gender affirmative medical care is being accessed, and most probably after you've reached puberty. So the post-puberty, pre-transition bodies can also experience trans euphoria, can also experience bodily joy, gender joy, which are the voices that get missed when we are too focused on distress. And and what does this in turn does is, we as society fail to create more of these euphoric experiences for trans people. We are too focused at looking at the uh, abnormality, uh, that we forget that it's the normal that is responsible for creating the abnormality in the other. So again, the natural looking, the immutable, the no makeup look, we're just too focused on that and not see what is going behind it. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. So yeah, so these are some of the terms that I mentioned: body positivity, trans joy, euphoria, the confidence that a trans person may experience. At the same time, I mean, this should not be seen as something which is exclusive of dysphoria. People can experience dysphoric instances and euphoria at the same time as well. They can at times be inconfident in their body and be confident at the same time. So why are we just focused at one particular aspect of their life and making it the entirety of the trans story? So that's something we need to talk about. This is one of the articles that came out of Growing Up Trans project that I am a part of, where 6 countries, researchers from 6 countries and sites from 6 countries are working together with young trans people and their families accessing gender affirmative medical care. So this is one article where we talk about gender euphoria. And you guys can go and have a look at it if you want to know more about this concept and get more references. Yes, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this phenomena has had detrimental and very significant impact on how the medical fraternity has reacted to trans realities. As I said in the initial opening lines of this presentation, the bioessential model that accepts biomedical explanation is the solution for all sorts of trans issues, is something that we're going to question today. Dysphoria becomes the basis of diagnosis and determines eligibility to access. Thus, we have already talked about. Is cisgenderist and okay, it designs binary-oriented trans people in a way that this is how the chronology of access to gender affirmative medical care has to go. This is what the parameters, the criteria have to be. So there comes the debate between trans enough versus unintelligible trans, unintelligible gender identities. You can read more about it here. Murawski talks about it with respect to trans embodiments for non-binary people very beautifully. So health practitioners are trained to look at the abnormal without actually questioning the role that normal has in pathologizing this non-cisnormative trans identities that we are talking about, that is missing from the discourse right now. So if we quickly go through this extract, and another thing that just makes me really happy is to think of my former self and my female self and be okay with that, and to feel like, I don't know, I feel really at peace with that connection. And I don't resent it. And I never hated myself. You know, I didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I was comfortable the whole time. But I never wanted to get rid of that whole part of my narrative. Like, man, I really hated myself and I felt like I was trapped. No, I didn't feel like I was trapped, and I didn't feel like I was in the wrong body. I just felt like my body needed to be matched up with something else. Looking back, that makes me really happy. So this is a 23-year-old trans man talking about, and this is a published extract. A trans man talking about their body, negating the prototype that we initially talked, that you should be hating your body, you should be very distressed with your body. Yes, this person is mentioning that they were distressed with your body, but do they want to hate? Did they hate it? Not really. Were they just wanted to get rid of it? Not really. So these are the kinds of narratives that are missing, and which would definitely put the current gender affirmative medical care system in an uneasy spot. Okay, can we get to the next slide, please? Yes. So here also, this is one of the narratives by a Indian trans man that I collected during my PhD work. I do not like how those 5 days every month kind of break my perception of me being a man on the other 25 days of the month. So I think the 5 days they're talking about is the periods, the menstruation time. They are discomforting, yes. But I do not hate my body. I do not want to change it medically. So how do you interpret, if you just going by that prototype of transnormativity, how do you interpret such voices? So this is what medicalization, pathologizing trans identities is about in the narrative that we are talking about, in the master narrative that we are talking about, and we'll try at the end to present an alternative narrative to it. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. So gender affirmative medical care, to treat gender dysphoria, you need gender affirmative medical care to treat gender dysphoria. This is one assumption, very basic assumption. But now, very recently, the researchers have gone ahead and said there can be more to gender affirmative medical care, because it can help you become more androgynous. So for non-binary trans individuals who do not want to conform to binary gender presentation and who want to be in those androgynous presentation, they can also access gender affirming medical care. And we'll see an example here. I want to have more masculine traits because I want to be perceived as androgynous and gender neutral. And that just doesn't happen to me right now. I need to physically change a little bit in order to achieve that reaction. I want people to look at me and be like, I don't know if that's a woman or a man. That is my goal. So that, I mean, I find this quote very powerful, very ground shaking. And that is the kind of work which needs to be there, which needs to be brought to forefront. Uh, all of us, I know we are working in the field of trans studies, gender studies, and we have trans people around us, with us. Many of you might belong to this fluid spectrum space, where the target is not to be seen as cisgender and disappear in the crowd as cisgender. And when I say that, I'm very conscious of the fact that many binary trans people want to be seen as their gender. They want to be seen as cisgender, their gender. And I am not trying to say that it is trans people wanting to be read as cisgenders perpetuate more harm or less harm. No, we are not going into that debate. It is about creating a space where diversity can exist. So if somebody wants to have gender affirmative medical care to appear more androgynous, it should be allowed. They should not be in that spot of proving their dysphoria, and parents also trying to again and again prove the dysphoria, which they have to do in front if they go for psychological assessment before accessing GAMC. You should not be put in that spot. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so here's another quote. I don't want my gender identity to be medicalized, so it's not a fear that they won't affirm it. They means medical practitioners here. It's more of a fear of, if I mention something, they're going to go like, oh, well, you should get this, and then this, and then this is what trans people want to do, and just all that kind of stuff. So this is a non-binary person speaking that if I enter that space of accessing gender affirmative medical care, I have this fear that the chain, the vicious cycle for vicious for a non-binary person, because one, this is not what is correlated to their own sense of gender. Plus, secondly, it'll most probably make them very closely aligned to the other gender that is not their true sense of gender. So this is kind of a dilemma that currently is when we talk about the limitations of gender affirmative medical care. It is quite clear now that gender affirmative medical care is very binary in its perspective, and the space for many trans people who do not conform to traditional cisgender roles is very limited in this system. Okay, if we can go to the next slide, please. We can see some of direct repercussions of the transnormative framework that we have been discussing today on the familial aspects and the familial setting. So initially, the literature about parental and familial perspective in trans studies was very limited to parents accepting their children. So in that case, the overall family's acceptance had a very positive impact on the youth's mental health, their social well-being. And in cases where parents did not accept the repercussions on the youth's mental health and social well-being, intellectual well-being was detrimental. Initially, the research was limited up to this. It was a very important contribution, but later, now the researchers have started to delve deeper into the impact of trans young people's gender transition on their families, including secondary stigma and the stress that the parents experience. And there's a lot of work that is here. Uh, at this point, I would say uh, there are parents and families who are accepting of their children, who are affirming of their child's gender identity, who are going to the extent of consenting, accessing for gender affirmative medical care. But what happens is this well-meaning support also can unintentionally perpetuate normative narratives that we are talking about today. Despite the family's overall commitment to the youth's well-being, uh, there are instances, like for example, before coming to Canada, when I was working with Indian trans community, there was a parent who was a doctor and had a trans child. So as soon as the child came out to the parent looked in a hurry to begin gender affirmative medical care, to seek puberty blockers, um, because the timely access to gender affirmative medical care was very important for this parent. And yes, it is important, but what was the psyche behind is that they wanted to avoid their child being read as trans, or having an embodiment that was very easily readable as trans, which was not cis readable. And we have seen parents having a lot of concern about their children eventually passing successfully in future. So begin this early, the fear of passing, will my child pass successfully or not? Um, Passing in itself is a very cisgenderist and transnormative concept. And I also agree that most of it might come from the space where parents are concerned about their child's safety and security in this very transphobic world, and especially nowadays. Yes, the desire for passing comes from that space. But at the same time, this emphasis, while being protective, is also invalidating their their current gender identity, the time and space they need to actually explore the gender identities possible and reinforce the premises of cisgenderism. So, and also saying that your current body is not enough. I mean, I have heard parents say, uh, I feel bad for my child because they are born in the wrong body. Yes, agree. You are coming from a positive space, or saying that I'm thankful that my child is transitioning from this binary gender to this binary gender and is not non-binary. So all of this is perpetuating a lot of cisgenderism, transnormativity to your child. You're talking, sitting in that setting with your child. And yes, you are supportive and affirming of your child, but still you're contributing to this larger system. And this is not in any way to shame or blame the family, the child, the trans community, because the onus of challenging the stereotypes should not be on those families. They're already doing a lot, affirming their child's gender, accepting it. But why I'm talking about these narratives here is to highlight the narrative constraint that is present in the trans studies that we are working in, that unintentionally affirm uh, the same stereotypes, and we are all socialized in that milieu. So the intention is to start questioning that socialization, to start questioning those prototypes, those stereotypical assumptions of being trans and feeling safe. I mean, this is not a kind of world that we want to create, where only cis readable trans or successfully passing trans will feel safe, and parents and caregivers of trans children who are androgynous, who do not want to transition, who are non-binary, always have that concern and fear. Okay, so can we move on, please? Yes, so the way forward for me is to open up the category of trans, embrace all kinds of diversities of gender that exist, and make space for both binary, trans, and non-cis readable trans embodiments in the society. That is something that we need to work forward to. It's not an easy goal, but it is a very important goal. Here is an article that came very recently from the Growing Up Trans project, and it is about families with more than one trans person in the family, and how we could see that they were investing or divesting from the cisnormative um, the narrative that we discussed today. So if anybody is interested, they can go. It is open access article, and it's easily available online. Yes. Next slide. So here are the references. If you want to go and read more about any of the topics that we've touched on today, here are the references. Thank you so much for listening. And some of the pictures that you could see in today's presentations come from a Aravani art project. Aravani is another word for Hijra community in India. And this is our project, finished mural. So there are many, many in this particular city in Delhi.